Hi, you guys. Caitlin here. Thank you so much for joining me for another another episode of Lead from Within. So, in this podcast, we talk about the process, journey, personal experiences, and transformation of leading from awareness as a conscious creator, knowing we are the I am. Okay. In my first episode, I talked more about my experience with PTSD and how I came into stillness. And that really sets the stage for what we'll be talking about in today's episode, which is really embodying freedom from suffering. So, this is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart because being completely free of suffering is something I didn't think was possible. Until I really began to put into practice the teachings of Buddhism and Hinduism. So when we talk about Buddhism, one of the practices that helped me a lot through moments of suffering, especially with PTSD symptoms, but just in regards to suffering in general, right? So whether we're triggered, because all of us are triggered at one point or another. So no matter what type of suffering it was, a practice I had learned was to let the mind go, right? To not attach to the thoughts, to detach completely, and then send love and compassion. So you're changing the narrative and the focus. So instead of just being still, now we're adding a layer. Now, instead of just watching it all happen inside of you, you're redirecting the energy and you're asserting an intention of love and compassion for what you're experiencing, for everyone else, and for the mind. So you're directing it inward as well as outward. I did mention this in the last episode too, but I think it's helpful to go a little deeper into it as to what that really does. So when we're choosing to focus on love and compassion, and it's helpful to just say it first, I send love and compassion. Because when we're stuck in a state of, I shouldn't say stuck, when we're experiencing a state of suffering, right? When we're attaching to pain and we're feeling these emotions that are extremely painful, and we're at a crossroads of choice. Do I identify with these emotions and the narratives attached to these emotions, or do I not identify? When you send love and compassion, you're choosing not to identify with those stories and the emotions going through you. So by choosing that path, you're actually choosing the highest self. You're choosing the I am. You're choosing that you are no longer this ego avatar, and you're choosing the highest path. You're choosing the path of enlightenment. So that's how it really helped me, was when sending love and compassion. That's actually what's happening. Like, it's a very deep process that's transmuting everything into love. And so the act of being love and compassion, you might not feel it at first when you're sending it, right? You might still feel the feelings that you would identify as suffering. But when you're sending love and compassion and you're focusing on that, you're choosing not to even label the feelings anymore, and you're allowing them to just pass through you without judgment, without identification, and without stories. So as I said, this completely returns us to the I am state. And now when we return to the I am state, at the same time as we're letting everything pass through us, we're also allowing energies to just be energies, but we are converting everything we once experienced, identified as pain, we're converting it to unconditional love. So by the way, this is something I talk about on my YouTube channel, Compassion Tapestries. I have a playlist that talks about the 5 principles to embody the kingdom of heaven, and it goes through the 5 stages psychologically that I had to go through to get to this point. But one of them is seeing all as love, because now at this point, we're also detaching from the idea that we're separate from anything. So it's twofold, right? When we are sending love and compassion in the midst of our turmoil, in the midst of these experiences or feelings that could be considered suffering, once we're choosing to identify with the I am, now we're we are also transmuting everything into unconditional love, and we're becoming one with the true reality. So meaning now we're stepping like behind the veil, and we're not lowering ourselves to the 3D reality anymore. So if you can picture that, like that's what's actually happening when you're choosing the love and compassion piece, when you're choosing to embody it, when you're choosing to remain in the I am. You're no longer lowering yourself to the 3D reality. Isn't that so powerful? So the separation, this is when you really become aware of the separation. This is when I started to realize that every trigger I ever have is a temptation to identify as suffering. And it's a temptation to choose suffering. And I now know that suffering is actually just choosing to identify with everything outside of me and everyone as separate from me. And then I fall back into the victim state, and it's this perpetual cycle, right? And I realized I don't want to keep following that loop, because I want to be free from this egoic attachment to the world. I want to be sovereign in spirit. This is my true state of being, is sovereignty in spirit, not being actually affected by the 3D, because I am spirit. That's our true state of being, right? If I'm awareness, if I am consciousness, and everything is conscious, everything is reflecting me. And we'll get into that in later episodes, but that was really my path of choosing to be free from suffering. And I'll be honest, at the time when I was going through this process of just choosing love and compassion during like PTSD symptoms, or during any form of quote unquote suffering, I didn't realize that I was actually choosing not to suffer. Like, it's not like that was my goal. I only realized really how big this choice was, and that, oh my God, I can be free from suffering. Like, I don't have to suffer. That came after suffering so much, and then realizing that if I can choose compassion, if I can choose love, if I can choose not to succumb to these energies inside me or around me, outside of me, then I can choose, then that means the suffering doesn't actually exist at all. That even though everything is happening and I'm experiencing, I am the one calling it suffering. And so it brought me back to that quote of, like, I forget who said it, but it's before anyone is healed, you have to ask them, are you willing to give up what makes you sick, right? And often we look at that as give up things we're ingesting or food, but no, it's the idea of actually being sick. You have to give up the idea that sickness exists. That's what true healing means. And realizing that it is this, we give birth to everything. That's our roles as creators. That's our spiritual authority in this world, beyond this world. So if you've heard stories of people healing from cancer or things that we would call miraculous, it's because they're only choosing one thing that exists. They're choosing that they're healed. And so, yeah, it was really cool to come to that moment where it was like, it was a series of events, internally, right? I thought at one point I was just, we're taught to just process emotions and manage emotions, but that's actually backwards. Emotions are meant to just flow freely. They will come and they will go, but we allow them to exist, and there's nothing actually to manage. The only thing to manage is our perspective of them. What's the intention of our focus in our spirit and in our mind at the time we are experiencing these emotions, right? That's all there is to manage. And so it was really cool to come to that point and to realize that I was the one choosing suffering, no matter what is going on. And I understand this can be controversial, because you look around the world and you're like, well, how can you say that there's no suffering? But it's still, If we look at the world around us and say that we're not looking from the godly perspective, from the spiritual truth of things. That's not to say that, and this is why actually compassion is so important. This is where it's necessary. Because if we don't have compassion for ourselves and people around us, if we can't feel compassion and well-being for everything, we're not able to reflect something greater than what we see in the world around us. And if you're listening to this podcast right now, you probably know that we are far greater than the world around us. Just like Jesus said, I am in the world, but not of this world, right? So yeah, this really deep concept, even as I'm sharing this, I'm feeling like there's an odd sensation in my heart. It's like, it feels like something in my heart is moving. Like it's almost like a resistance to this truth. Yeah, so often I'm hesitant to talk about these things. I can be hesitant to talk about these things because there might be pushback, but I just know that this truth has brought such liberty into my life, such freedom to be happy, freedom to be joyful, freedom to be at peace, freedom to not suffer. You know, that's kind of what Buddha found when he sat under the tree and discovered enlightenment. So it's a really powerful work when I say to be free of suffering. It's not a light thing I'm talking about. It's a reality that exists. And if you choose this path, you'll find a well of abundance and a well of infinite resources that all are inside you. This is the path that unlocks reality being created outside of us. So when we, like, a lot of people love that quote. Gandhi said, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Even I used to see that quote and not really know what it meant. Oh, wow, I'm starting to cry. Because I would, like, with my business, I was just so like pushing for change in the 3D world, pushing for action, trying to force it with my will. What I didn't realize, the will that is actually the most valuable in this world is the will of the I am. The consciousness, our state of being. So the world truly is a mirror. So as I change, literally the world changes around me. This is why in the Tao it also says, you think you can improve the world? I don't think it can be done, because there's nothing actually to change in the world around us. Because we are one with everything. Everything is us. So there's only the inner work. Yeah. Wow, that was really deep. So yeah, freedom from suffering. So what does it look like once we choose freedom from suffering? In my experience, it's just that the nervous system is completely rejuvenated. And so again, well, we might always be tempted. There'll always be opportunity to choose suffering, but instead we choose compassion and love. And we direct it towards others, we direct it towards ourselves. And when we choose to just see that, we're changing the world around us. It doesn't mean to deny what's in front of us. Like, I think it's important to say that it's not about denying injustice per se, but it is choosing to understand the greater spiritual truth that although there is perceived injustice in this world, and although that it is a reflection, and that this is another thing I talk about in my videos on my YouTube channel. Years ago, I had a dream called the Tapestry of Injustice, or I called it the Tapestry of Injustices, because it was brought before me and it was beautiful and vibrant. And so understanding that there's a spiritual, we don't see the whole picture, that for every perceived injustice, there's a spiritual reason why it is happening that we cannot understand with our human logic, right? So because we are creators, whatever we judge is what we create more of. So why would I, this is why I've become so careful now with calling something unjust, calling something anything, because I understand that by the power of my tongue, things are created. The word becomes flesh. So this is why in Buddhism, it's so paramount to focus on compassion and love and create compassion and love and feel, sit with others, serve them, find solutions, be the solutions, but doing it with a heart of love and compassion rather than a heart of forcing change. Because then that's just going back right where we were, lowering ourselves to the world, but we are greater than the world. So yeah, really choosing not to suffer has changed me so much, and it's actually even changed the way I interact with people, and I would love to know if you relate to this. So not only in like a holistic perspective of the world and everything, but in my daily relationships, it's really changed the way I interact. I no longer feel the need to perform anymore for anyone, and I'm so careful about my words because I understand the power in them and that I am a creator. So if someone comes to me with news about another person, about an illness or something, I'm not going to entertain that. Inwardly, I'm going to say they are in perfectly health because I know that I choose not to suffer and I don't want anyone else to suffer. So I'm going to say, you are in perfect health. You are healed. Just this is what Jesus did. Go and sin no more. He's not talking about sin like doing something bad. The sin is when we forget who we are and we forget that we are creating with every word and with our intentions, that you're creating your reality. So yeah, choosing not to suffer has also helped me embody the highest outcome, not just for myself, but for everyone around me. And it means I won't compromise my godliness for anyone. I'm not going to lower myself, my godliness, for anyone anymore. Now I am on the pedestal because I am all that exists. Whereas before it was putting everyone else on a pedestal, putting the world on a pedestal, putting world events on a pedestal. But now I know who I am. I know I don't have to suffer. I know if I'm suffering, it's just my choice. And it doesn't mean I'm not going to feel things. I feel things all the time because my heart's open. But I allow it to exist and I think it and I love it, and then it's transmuted, right? So it's when we're choosing not to suffer, we're choosing to feel everything for the sake of transmuting it to love and compassion for all. Yeah, so that's episode 2. But thank you for listening, and thank you for allowing me to share my story here with you. And I will see you on the next episode.